Devyn's mission log. Welcome back, everybody, and thank you for being here. I really appreciate having you here. Just like always, we're going to be switching up the vibe again today. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar, but back in the late 90s and early 2000s, there was this show called Beyond Belief Fact or Fiction that Eddie and I are both huge fans of. I think more so me in this case. I used to watch it all the time as a kid whenever I could find it, and even to this day I'll still throw in a couple of episodes. Essentially, the concept is they would tell 5 stories throughout the episode, and you would have to determine whether or not they were based on true events or if they were completely fictional. So, inspired by that, I decided to try that out in today's mission log. So I'm going to be telling 3 different horror stories today, and it's going to be your guys' job to figure out which ones are fake and which ones are inspired by true events. I'll reveal the results at the end of today's episode, so you'll be able to tell which ones you got right. Until then, I hope you guys enjoy. I know this thread is a little old, but I want to share my experience. So, I've always had weird things happen to me that I can't explain my whole life, and have always believed in the paranormal. But something happened that made me stop searching for the paranormal. Something I wish to never experience again in my life. It wouldn't have been as bad if it wasn't in my own house. The house that me, my wife, my sister-in-law, and my son all live in. So, I bought an old Ouija board, and I started playing with it. We had several paranormal things go on in the house beforehand, but it only got worse with the use of the Ouija board. A few noises, things moving around the house, that sort of thing. Cups would be thrown from flat surfaces with no one near it. My son one time even walked to a corner in the bathroom by the washing machine, back when he couldn't talk, and just started reaching for people. And started reaching for someone in the corner that wasn't there. I picked him up and ran out of the room. Keep in mind, all this was before the Ouija board. But then I started playing with the thing. Every time I would talk to some entity, a ghost named Dell. Well, I got curious and looked up my state's death records. Eventually, I found a girl who died of a car accident in the same county I lived in. Her name was Delise Ray. As I typed this, my lights flickered. I haven't experienced anything since I've saged the house after the story I'm about to tell you, so this is really freaking me out. All the information Dell gave me matched up with this girl, except she said she was 6, and the girl who died was 9. Which made sense if she was sitting on the opposite side of the Ouija board. A 6 would look like a 9 to a kid. But this wasn't the part that freaked me out. See, objects would move from one side of the room to the other when I would turn my back. We had a little chair out on our front porch that would sit up next to the house, facing towards the road. It was a kid chair for my son. Some days I would come home and this chair would be facing the door to our house. I didn't think anything of it because my in-laws were in and out of the house all the time, so I figured they must have just bumped it. No problem. I would just move the chair back. Well, one day, it was just me and my sister-in-law at the house. I had just got home 30 minutes prior to this incident. The chair was in the spot it always was, and I was in our living room, walking towards the hallway. I was about 2 feet away from the window the chair normally sits in front of. I hear a noise on the porch and I look outside, but I don't see anyone there. Keep in mind, the door is only about 7 to 8 feet from this window. So I run to the door, I open it, and the chair is right in front of the doorway, facing towards me. I freak out and start yelling for my sister-in-law. She walks into the hallway from the kitchen and sees the chair has moved and starts to freak out too. She didn't even know that I had been coming home to the chair like this till after what happened, and she saw it right then. So, it wasn't her moving it. Still, that's not the freakiest part yet. One day, I was home alone with the pig. During all this, we decided to get a pet pig so that we can blame the stuff happening on him to ease ourselves. And well, we had baby gates set up at both entrances to the living room to keep the pig from getting into everything. So it was just me and the pig at home. Everyone was gone for the night, and I wanted to enjoy my time gaming. So I'm playing with my friends, having a great night, when all of a sudden it felt like I was being watched. So I turn around and I see a girl, pale white, not see-through though, with long black hair and black eyes, peeking around the doorway and reaching for the baby gate. It looked like she was going to open it. She noticed me and instantly dashed around the doorway. I screamed out "no" to the top of my lungs, and my friends were freaking out in my headset. They thought I was being robbed. I told them to come over right now, and I stayed pinned against the TV, watching both entrances to the living room until they got there. The next day, we saged the house, and I vowed to never play the Ouija board in my own house ever again. And if I did play it, I would sage myself in the house every time. But this was only some of the things that happened. There's a lot more that I left out, but putting them all would be way too much. Anyways, that's the gist of the story of how I stopped seeking the paranormal. This isn't a story I like to think about much, but with some of the recent headlines I've seen in the news lately about my hometown, I thought it was time I shared it. So this happened to me back in my early 20s, back when I was still living with my parents. At the time, I was seeing this girl, but things were rocky. We had dated for a few weeks back in high school, and I really wanted things to go good with her this time around, so I was basically stressing myself out on the daily. Eventually, I got into the habit of taking my motorcycle out for late night drives to clear my head whenever things got really bad. The thing I saw approached me during one of these drives. I live out in the sticks. In my city, there's really nothing more than farmlands, abandoned buildings, and old people. A sleepy city, you know? Nothing too exciting about the place. So when I went on my drives, I usually tended to drive into the heart of the city so that I would feel less alone, be around the people. Well, for whatever reason, this night, I decided to drive further into the wilderness. I got a text from the girl, her name doesn't matter for this story, telling me that she was out on a date with another guy that she was still seeing. I couldn't be mad because we had agreed to keep seeing other people and explore our options before we came to any final decisions, but it still hurt. Next thing I knew, my helmet was on, and I was on my bike, headed deep for the forest that were on the edge of town. The forecast had said it was going to be a clear night, so I figured I'd park my bike somewhere and look at the stars, maybe listen to the radio I carried with me. And for the first 20 minutes or so, I assumed that's exactly what I was going to do, until I got to the creek near the edge of town. The thing about this creek was it had this old antique bridge from the Pilgrim days. Small and made of all stones, just like the ones you always see in fairy tales. Thing is, just like so many bridges before this one, it was said to be haunted. Me and my friends used to play by the bridge as kids, and I never really got the impression that anything was wrong with it, aside from it just being ugly. Still, everyone swore up and down that the bridge was cursed or haunted. They said there was a demon that lived under the bridge, and it would attack people who passed by. I thought they were just stories. But when my motorcycle started to break down right beside the bridge, I can't even lie, I felt a little nervous. At night by myself, the bridge felt like it was looming over me, like I was in a place I shouldn't be. I hopped off and started messing with the bike. I thought it was something with the ignition because the motor wouldn't turn over, and I had just replaced the battery a few weeks back. So as I'm sitting there, fiddling with this thing, I heard this deep grumbling noise from behind me, right from where the bridge was. The sounds of water from the creek, I told myself. Maybe a frog. They usually came out around that time of year. Then, again it sounded. A little deeper this time, and a little louder. I spun my head around and looked at the bridge. Nothing. I was just scaring myself. At least, that's what I wanted to believe. Then, I heard it. The sound of footsteps charging towards my direction, coming from right behind me. I didn't even turn around to see what it was. I jumped over the seat of my bike and rolled onto the grassy field, screaming. It was only when I had run a good distance that I happened to look back for just a brief second. And then I saw it. It was some deformed shadow. I was running, so I'm pretty sure I'm misremembering this, but it looked like a tall goat creature. It had the head of a goat. At least, it looked like it did. But its body looked human, even down to the way it ran. It was like somebody slapped a goat head onto a naked man's body, only its limbs were bent all wrong. Its arms looked broken and they were flailing every which way while it chased me. It screamed, but when it didn't sound human. At one point, I had seen its body was covered in what I assumed was blood, because what the hell else would it be? I ran without looking back for another couple of minutes until my lungs hurt and my sides were burning with pain. I nearly collapsed on the floor, barely able to breathe. I was super far away from my bike, but luckily I still had my flip phone. I ended up calling my dad to come pick me up. I waited underneath the nearby street lamp the entire time. When he asked why I had left my bike behind, I told him that I couldn't fix it and I had gone to find help and got lost. I don't think he believed me because he kept staring at me all the way back to the bike. He looked at me like I was lying. I can't blame him since I probably looked scared, but I didn't know what to tell him. I didn't think he would believe me, honestly. To this day, I still try not to think about it, but sometimes I wonder if it was some prank a couple kids were trying to pull on me. Until I saw this girl went missing around the bridge a few days ago, and that's what inspired me to tell this story. I don't expect you to believe me. All I know is whenever I go for my late night rides now, I always stay in the cities, and I always tell everyone where I'm planning on going. Who knows? That could have been me as the missing person. P.S. If anyone is curious, I never found out exactly what happened with my bike. My dad dropped me off and stayed with me while I messed around with it. The thing started after a few minutes, and there was nothing wrong with it at all. I had that bike for another 3 years, and it never did anything like that again for the entire time I had it. Before you ask, no, I didn't investigate the bridge or look into anything regarding it. After my bike started, me and my dad got the hell out of there, and I avoided that place until I ended up moving states. I never checked if there was any hoof prints on the ground. I never looked around the bridge. None of that. People get upset when I tell them that, but then I always ask them, would you? So, this one isn't particularly scary, but it's still a very odd supernatural experience that I had. So, once when I was 8 or maybe 9, I was at an after-school club, quote-unquote, the kind of place you go when both your parents work after school hours and you can't be trusted home alone, with 3 of my friends at the time. It was winter, and although it was probably only 5 or 6 p.m., it was very dark out. We were in the big school playground where the club was hosted, and we were all playing around and making up monster stories. So, on to the point. We were already spooked out, talking about scary films we had seen and whatnot, when suddenly my friend says, "Hey guys, do you see that?" We all turn to where she is looking, and one by one, all 4 of us see this oily black silhouette of a tall man walking through our gym. Our school was built around the same time the Titanic was, and had huge windows surrounding the large PE hall. At this time, there is still a janitor in the school, but we can clearly see her on the 2nd floor. The lights are still on in the hall, and there is no obvious explanation as to what this figure could be. Being curious, idiotic children, we decide to get closer and try to take a better look. Well, as we do, we seem to scare it off, as the thing disappears between 2 of the towering windows. This isn't the end though, because as we are trying to figure out what happened, I see the gym hall door slide open a crack. And, I kid you not, the lights in the room this thing had supposedly just entered flicker badly. We eventually named this thing the Black Blur because of its oily color and strange movement. Anyway, fast forward maybe a year or 2, me and one of the people from the previous encounter are still very racked up in all this paranormal stuff. We are both standing relatively close to one of the school's entrances, also in the evening at the after-school club. One of the 2 double doors is propped up with garbage bags from the janitor. We are looking at it and talking to each other about how it kinda looks like a vampire all curled up. We were bored, okay? Anyways, something catches my eye. Only 20 feet in front of me, I see it again, but way more vivid. I am literally too stunned to speak as I stare at it. I must have looked stupid to my friend until he followed my line of sight and saw it too. Lo and behold, the Black Blur is running back and forth across the door. Now, I can guarantee you this wasn't my eyes playing tricks on me. This thing ran back and forth at the door for a good 20 seconds, going right, then left, then right, then left, and so on. My friend saw it too and said, "Hey, do you see that?" I nodded, and we slowly crept closer like the previous encounter. It disappeared again as we approached, unfortunately. It's been years since then, and I have never encountered it in all this time. I probably never will, as I'm obviously long gone from that school. I kept in touch with these friends, and they all remember it clear as day like I do. I honestly hope to see the black blur again, and since I live within sight range of my old school, I just might one day. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the stories. So, what do you think? Which of these were real and which of these were fiction? Did you get it? How about that first story? The guy with the pig. If you thought this story was real, then you're correct. It was. I found this story on a Reddit forum, and the original poster had lots of information to back up his story and validate it. So as far as I can tell, it's most likely real. But what about the one with the unfortunate traveler on the motorcycle? If you thought this one was real, I got you. That's actually my story. It took me about 20 minutes to write, and I tried to make it as authentic as I could. I hope you enjoyed it. Finally, the black blur, as I've come to refer to it in my head. Did you think this one was fake? If you did, you're wrong. Turns out, some lady in England actually did experience this as a kid, and she's been constantly looking for answers on the forums where I originally found this post. So, how did you do? Did you get these correct? Or did I end up fooling you? I hope you guys really enjoyed this episode. Again, I kind of wanted to switch up the vibe here and give you guys something a little bit more interesting. I have plans of doing this again in the near future, but only if there's a real demand for it. So if you like this, please reach out and let me know. That way I could put more effort into the second one, make it a little bit longer, a little bit better, a little bit scarier, etc. And if you guys really do enjoy it, I can make it an ongoing series where every so often I do another one of these episodes. And before I let you go, I'd like to thank user Ocelot742 and user InterestingCase267 for their stories. If you guys ever hear this and you want me to take down the story, please let me know. Alright everybody, be safe and have a great rest of your day.